Hello and welcome to our channel where we share insights on long COVID to help you better understand your symptoms. In our upcoming interview, I will be speaking with inventor and philanthropist Joachim Gerlach and our esteemed medical advisor, Dr. Leo Gallant, about one of the most pressing issues for long COVID sufferers, the impact of the spike protein. We will discuss how the spike protein lingers in the body, the molecular level damage it can cause to cells and tissues, and its role in creating inflammation and other symptoms that so many people are struggling with. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe button so you won't miss any crucial information, plus more content aimed at helping you on your recovery. As always, we are here to bring you science, knowledge, and hopeful solutions. Stay tuned. So welcome everyone. Today we're tackling the mysteries of spike protein in the body, the tiny troublemaker that seems to cause a lot of health problems in long COVID patients. Could this be the ultimate disruptor of the immune system? Let's find out. And joining us to unmask some spike science, we have a remarkable person, Joachim Gerlach, activist, philanthrope, and inventor. Also, our esteemed medical advisor and leading long COVID medical expert, Dr. Leo Gallant. Welcome both to our channel.
Great to be with you and Joachim this morning.
Thank you so much. It has been a while, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion. And I hope that we can bring some clarity into the matters of spike toxicity and persistence and what can be done about it.
A little overview. So the spike protein is a distinctive feature of COVID-19 virus, which plays a crucial role in how the virus enters our cells and triggers infection. While it enables the virus to bind to human cells, recent research has shown that spike protein can stay in the body even after the virus has cleared, contributing to persistent symptoms in some patients. Now, these lingering spike proteins are believed to disrupt normal cellular processes, impact organs, and potentially cause inflammation, immune reactions, and other health issues associated with long COVID symptoms. Today, we will be exploring how this tiny protein can have such a lasting impact and what can be done to address its effect. So Joachim, we know that long COVID is linked with fatigue and brain fog and some gastrointestinal issues, as well as persistent symptoms for over years. How do spike proteins trigger this kind of chronic responses in the immune system or nervous system? With that in mind, maybe you can explain at the cellular level, how exactly do spike proteins enter our cells and make their way into exosomes, and what role do exosomes actually play in spreading these proteins throughout the body? And with that in mind, it would be great to hear your overview of the presentation that you're going to share with us tonight.
Yeah, to give maybe an understanding, the spike protein is it's just like the hook that the virus is using to attach and enter our cells. But it can be disconnected from the virus itself, and also during vaccination, you can have somewhere between 20 billion and 70 billion spike proteins in circulation after infection and or transfection with the vaccine. So the spike protein itself is not only fusing with our cell receptors and our cell membranes, it's also, to say mildly, a very extraordinarily toxic protein. And so we are still in the investigation of what exactly still we are missing, but it looks pretty scary. And what it can do, it can completely alter our cell signaling in many, many different ways into inflammatory signaling. It can switch off the apoptosis or autophagy mechanisms. It can lead to a cell cycle arrest. It can lead to cancer. It can do a lot. It can cause inflammation, neuroinflammation, can cause thrombosis. And so the list is pretty endless. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of different signaling cascades that can be off and that we have identified in the past 4.5 years. So the persistence of that protein, especially in the intracellular space, is of great concern and can go on for a very prolonged time, which I will show with some papers. And the problem is that the body is, because of all these altered cell mechanisms, is not able to get rid of it, as it usually does with normal viruses. So in that respect, it is a little bit like a retrovirus that is a kind of sticking around in the cell. It's a self-preserving mechanism. It's a parasite that wants to survive. So it switches off anything that can become dangerous to its existence. And that is our problem. It's not only spike persistence. Of course, once the virus or the spike protein has entered the organism, it will trigger many dysregulations and epigenetic dysregulations and self-fueling and perpetuating cascades that even in the absence of spike, even if you get rid of the spike, will still continue. That is still under investigation to really narrow in exactly which ones are triggered and then self-perpetuate. That will be keeping us busy probably for the best part of next year. Yes, and also let's hear Leo's opinion, because I'm only the messenger. Leo is dealing with the patients on a daily basis. Yeah, so that's important to hear from clinical practice. How is that playing out in real life in the population?
The toxic effects of the spike protein became really clear as long ago as 2021, I think. And the first study I had seen on this, and I think it is relevant to the clinical effects, was a study done at the Scripps Institute in La Jolla, California, major research institute in the US, that demonstrated that the spike protein, when it binds to the lining of the blood vessels, the cells called endothelial cells, creates an inflammation there that inactivates mitochondria. And that mitochondrial inactivation creates inflammation of the lining of the blood vessel, which then the consequences of that are that you get blood clots. You get microscopic blood clots and persisting inflammation of the lining of the blood vessel lining. And one of the most clinically obvious effects of COVID-19, and we see this with the severe vaccine reactions also, so it is a spike protein effect, is inflammation of the lining of blood vessels, which we can measure, microscopic blood clots, which we can measure, and mitochondrial dysfunction, which we can also measure. The combination of those things produces a state in the body that contributes to one of the most disabling aspects of long COVID, which is this post-exercise malaise or post-exercise symptom exacerbation combination. And to call it post-exercise malaise, I think really that's an inappropriate name. It does not explain the agony for people who are severely affected that can occur with just a slight increase in the level of activity. So this is one of the things that I see as a downstream effect of spike protein toxicity in the body. The spike protein on its own, it's as you pointed out, Joachim, it's a circulating protein. And when it gets into the cell, however, that's where a lot of toxicity occurs. A group at Harvard found that 20% of people who thought they had recovered from COVID-19 still had circulating spike protein a year later, year and a half later. That frequency is much higher in people who have long COVID symptoms, and the level of spike protein is much higher.
Thank you so much. That's really a huge piece of science, and would really love to see your slides. I know you dig at the molecular level, and I want to see and show other listeners what is really happening at the molecular level, so everyone understands how serious the problem is.
Thank you, Leo. I can endorse that. we will get into these mechanisms that you were describing in today's presentation. We have created a new platform in Europe and in the US called the Healthcare Channel, and I'm doing starting already a series of webinars where we explain more backgrounds and do presentations. And the Healthcare Channel is, so to speak, like a neutral platform where we can present things not as a company or as a clinic or as a doctor, but as a similar like we did with the Long COVID Coalition in the beginning when we started off. So, but we had to create also like a association, and in Europe it's already done, so that we are talking between us as a members. Especially in Europe, it's important, so that we are not in the public domain per se. So that is giving us a lot more. Maybe it's good for the listeners to have a quick look at who is involved in all this work since the last 4.5 years. And with your permission, Leo, I have also put your picture here. But remember the conferences we did and everybody that has been really contributing a lot to our work, from Dr. Chetty all the way to Beate Jäger, Carlo Brogna, and Philip McMillan, I forgot here, Kevin McKern, Charles Rixey. And now lately the last 3 days I was with Dietrich Klinghardt at his conference, and we worked together, and it was very, very positive. And so a lot of people are now working in concert, so to speak, and I will try to deepen now this collaboration and the exchange of information and the progress on the work. Currently, my main pet project is our new lab in Japan, together with the neuroscientist Kevin McKern, and also Charles Rixey, the Marine that has been doing all the documentation on the gain of function work and also testified in Congress, is also working with Kevin at our lab now. And we are now investigating mainly, of course, the neurodegenerative pathways in hamster models, because the hamsters have a resembling, the receptor landscape in the hamsters is very similar to ours, plus especially for prion disease, these animals are good candidates too. So we have an animal laboratory, a behavioral unit, we have RT-Quick machines for prion detection, microtones, cell cultures. So it has been equipped to a almost university level standard. And so now we are right in the middle of injecting S1 subunit into the hamsters, and also watching them from the behavioral standpoint, as well as also trying different therapeutic options to see if we can mitigate these neurological disease expressions. So let me jump right to, maybe important for us. So what my methodology has been from day one was I don't come from the side of symptom and disease expression. I come from the other side. I'm only interested in each molecular pathway that is happening and trying to address them all one by one, and it's several hundred. And so it's a completely different approach than what is usually being undertaken, especially in such a multisystemic disease. But I think that if we address upstream the signaling cascades very early, and at the same time, the disease expression and the symptom will automatically be improved. So that is my personal strategy. But if you look at the problem now that most therapists are facing, is that long COVID is also hiding behind the mask of common chronic illnesses. And that makes it so hard for the normal communities of therapists and doctors to distinguish, is this now from the spike? Is this from the vaccine? Is this long COVID? Or did this heart attack or this stroke or this diabetes 2 or the Alzheimer's develop just as usual, or the cancer? So that is where we have to do more work. So to make it distinguishable between normal chronic illnesses or accelerated chronic illnesses through COVID-19. The main pillars that I would say that we could agree upon are the main disease expressions, that the fields of disease expression that can be observed is cardiovascular diseases, that myocardial and the vascular system with thrombosis, strokes, heart attacks, etc. Neurodegenerative diseases like brain fog, but we come to that later. And immunodeficiency, I would rather call it immune dysregulation, autoimmune disease, cancer, and metabolic disorders, as to classify them the field that we are looking at. There are more, but let's say that is what is percentage-wise pretty much to be observed. And so how big is the problem? I don't know, Valentina, if you have better numbers. Nature magazine in 2023 said 409 million people were somehow affected by long COVID and or post-vac is of course not mentioned, but it's for sure also, as the symptoms are very similar, probably just being included in that. But 400 million people is quite a staggering number. It makes this one of the biggest challenges for the healthcare system ever that I can see. And if you want to go and you want to look at the methodology, how to deal with that, I take this example. I look at a disaster area, and if you watch then how the FEMA, especially the Army Corps of Engineers, would come in and what kind of methodology they would take. You know, there is a certain following order how to approach a disaster like that, and we should stick to that in the same way. And so it is important to understand let's say the progress of the disease, how it happens. And so this is actually a very old chart that's almost 4 years old, and it shows how, and in vaccination, this happens in the same following order. And what is distinguishing our point of view a little bit is especially phase 2, after the viral phase, is the hypersensitivity part. And that we can get to that later also in the presentation. This we had to add because of Chetty. And all these different phases of the intrusion of the spike protein and or the virus will finally lead to this, what we can see here now in long COVID, organ tissue damage, DNA damage, epigenetic dysregulation, metabolic disorders, immune dysfunction, autoimmune disorders, and etc. So this is more or less what we can hammer out. And maybe just before I start with my presentation, I want to show one thing here, because that's interesting. Dr. Chetty, when we look at this hypersensitivity part here, he was using very successfully histamine blockers, for example, in the treatment of acute COVID. And a few months ago, we found that paper here, and I sent it to Shankara because I found that very interesting. The histamine receptor acts as an alternative receptor for SARS-CoV-2, so that H1 blockers make perfectly sense to use them even in the acute phase. And that was desloratadine and azolastine being the two most potent ones from the inhibitory point of view. So since we have seen that study here, many doctors that I know are using these two histamine H1 blockers in acute COVID. And even if you try to get rid of the spike protein, you will have the effect that you will knock many out of the cells into the circulation. So it makes sense even during a detox approach to also use histamine inhibitors, because also the mast cells are anyhow going to be triggered by whatever you do. And so it's good to calm down the process. Also, that before we even start. So let's look at the persistent and toxic spike protein, or even viral persistence in general. And we've been investigating that now very throughoutly over the past years. These are experiments we did in India. We took spike protein and we marked it with the fluorescent marker. And then after 72 hours injection into the tail vein, you see a complete distribution of the spike protein in the animals. And now we have the great luck of having a laboratory in Germany, the only one in the world, where you can send blood samples and get a quantification of how much spike you can find, either in the blood or in PBMCs or in exosomes or in the stool. So this is a fantastic new opportunity for us to monitor better and to check on these patients. So you have the quantitative determination of SARS-CoV-2 spike in exosomes. You can also look at the N protein, then you know that it's from an infection for sure. And then you can look in the PBMCs, which are the immune cells, which I prefer. These two are the ones I prefer. You can also look at spike protein in plasma and serum, or in stool, or in other, even in the milk. But I think that we get to that later. The persistence of the spike protein, you have to check it intracellularly. And what does the data say here? You have here, this is 650 days after acute COVID. You see still a strong presence of viral persistence. And what we've been warning, remember, Valentina, since years, especially in the olfactory system, for example, for a very long time, 4 to 6 months, and this one is even almost 2 years. Now, so you can see that the virus and also the spike protein, it doesn't really matter, can persist for a long time, and it can come from both, from the virus and or the vaccine. This is a post-mortem publication on post-mortem histopathology from the Helmholtz Institute in Germany, and they found enormous amounts of spike in the skull and meninges of deceased COVID-19 patients. Long time also, many months after infection. And so you can look at hundreds of papers describing that SARS-CoV-2 persistent, seemingly recovered from COVID-19. And they always say the same, senescent syncytial cells. Yeah, so that means you have here cells that have become completely dysfunctional, where the virus and or the spike protein can persist for a very, very long time. And that can be, for example, the cause of this year, you remember Jasmine Hayer from the UK, she was in this study here, and where she had absolutely the lowest lung gas exchange from all patients observed. And it looks like that the persistence of spike protein and virus, even 6 months, would cause cellular senescence and syncytial formation in the lung alveoli. For example, this is only one of many examples. And here's a very interesting one. That is our dear colleague and friend, Carlo Brogna. He looked at the blood of vaccinated patients, and he could find freely circulating spike protein after even 187 days. Now, given the affinity of the spike protein to our cells and cell receptors, it is very, very unlikely that the spike protein can circulate free in the serum or plasma for more than 24 hours, because it will just attach somewhere. It's like a supermagnet to the endothelium. Now, so the only conclusion you can take from this one here is that these patients with 6 months production of spike protein in the blood were still producing spike. It didn't stop from the vaccine. It was clearly a vaccine because it had the double proline insert. The good news is, and I don't know if I can disclose that, but Carlo said this is probably going to the, that's the maximum amount. It won't go longer than 6 months. He's publishing that, so let's wait for that data. And here we have Bruce Patterson, also same here, 245 days in the monocytes, still circulating with spike and being detected in the monocytes, which are part of the PBMCs. The only thing we disagree upon is the way it gets in, because the monocytes can kind of, like a Pac-Man, they can eat up viral proteins, but they are also susceptible for direct infection. And these are all the receptors that I could hammer out on the monocytes alone, for example, where spike could enter, or virus. In the end, what comes out is pretty much the same. But here we have then, that is the second big achievement of Carlo Brogna, the bacteriophage behavior, which we have discussed in many other occasions in the past. But may I add, I did a lot of research. So bacteriophage behavior of a virus is not something unknown, but the only thing that's unknown is that a virus can infect bacteria, and the same virus, same species, can infect at the same time our human cells. That is unheard of. And that makes this so dangerous, because if you look at the disaster here, which I drew up here as a comic strip, you see here the gut lining, the epithelium. This would be the bloodstream, and this would be the side of the bacteria. And so if you want to deal with this mess, you can use antibiotics, but at the same time, you will have viral or spike persistence in the epithelial cells as well. And these are completely different cells than the bacteria. So you would need completely different methodology to get the spike out. And now I lost one slide here, but okay. So if you look at the problem in general, at the moment, I'm tending not to recommend or look at antibiotics so much. I look at binders, because if we have a lot of binders in this environment here, because in order to get a ping pong infection, for example, between the epithelium and the bacteria, or even between bacteria, the virus has to jump. And if there's enough binder present that will bind to the spike or to the virus, then it's going to inhibit the transmission in the gut in general. And it's a very passive and very safe method to do that. Yeah, and there is a product in the US. It contains zeolite and some algae. I think it's from this company, Medicinals, and it can come in helpful here. But any zeolite, for example, which is easily available, would be good. The cleanup zeolite is extremely good at binding, for example, in the gut. Yeah, because here you see this is the epithelium being still infected after quite a long time. It doesn't say here how long it was, but it was also more than 6 months. And so, yeah, here's here, some individuals months after infection. And we get to that later. These are easy to come by, these cells, because if you ingest any compound that would enable the cells now to break up and get rid of the proteins, the first cells they're going to meet is the epithelial cells in the gut. Now, it's not like your remote little region in the back of your skull where it's more difficult to bring something there, but that's the first line, yeah, where we attack. So that is not so difficult. Yeah, then let's have a look now at what you were also referring to in the beginning, Leo, is the cardiovascular system.